We've covered a lot of top 10 so far for Scarlet and Violet, but today I want to go into a bit of a longer topic regarding what you should use. So today, I want to break down the best Pokemon for every type in Scarlet and Violet. Today's list will break down the 18 Pokemon you should use in your playthrough for Scarlet and Violet. And while some Pokemon may have dual types on our list today, I will make sure to ignore any duplicate nominations in order to give the most options for anyone who might want more than a single option for any particular typing. Starting off with grass types, we have our first Paldean starter being Meowscarada. Meowscarada is easily one of the strongest grass types in these games due to the high speed stat and extremely wide move pool. You can basically teach Meowscarada a move that will benefit you in any fight in these games, such as Play Rough for the Hassle Battle, Low Kick for Larry and Poppy, but best of all, you have your signature move, Flower Trick. Flower Trick is basically your go-to move for any neutral opponent, due to your guaranteed chance to land the move as well as a critical hit on your opponent. With several opponents, such as Titan Dondozo, Cloth, Kofu, and Rika having weaknesses to your dual stab of Grass and Dark, it's no wonder that Meowscarada establishes itself as the strongest grass type in these games. Moving into the best fire type, we have another starter being Skeledirge. Paldea was honestly the generation to be a fire type Pokemon, with the major bosses covering practically every type in the game. While the in-game also lacking hazards such as Stealth Rocks, Skeledirge sees a lot of reasons to actually be used on a team. With Skeledirge also having the ghost typing, you can utilize that secondary stab to damage a majority of your opponents that you may not damage well with your fire stab, such as dragons from Hassle, or you can use this defensively to take on Ares' team more easily. Skeledirge's signature move Torch Song turns your starter into a monstrous offensive threat by boosting your special attack stat by a single stage every time you use the move. Among the starters, Skeledirge probably has the best matchup against the gym storyline by a mile, due to how many are weak to fire, while also outclassing other fire types due to its signature move. Going over our final starter typing, we also ended up assigning this to our final Paldean starter, being Quaquaval. Quaquaval is probably the starter you choose if you want to have a strong matchup against the Titans, considering you're super effective against Cloth, Orthworm, and both Great Tusk and Iron Treads. While you still are able to utilize Quaquaval for other matchups, such as Larry from the Gym storyline or Mela in the Star Battles, you probably are outclassed by your other starter counterparts in this regard. Your signature move helps significantly with your in-game fights, being Aqua Step, which boosts your speed stat by one stage every time you use the move. Quaquaval, despite being among a wide pool of strong water types in these games, manages to be one of the best you can use throughout your Paldean journey. Starting off with our non-starter types, we have our best electric type in these games, being Pawmot. Pawmot's an electric type you gain access to early on in your journey through Pawmi, which later evolves into one of our first electric and fighting type Pokemon. The electric typing proves to be a fairly strong option early on for battles such as Kofu or the Titan Bombardier, while your fighting typing will prove useful in later stages, such as Iron Tusk if you're playing Violet, or Grusha's team in the late stages of your journey. One of Pawmot's best matchups though is against Poppy, as you're a fighting type that still manages to have a super effective option for Corviknight. Pawmot has two signature moves, being Revival Blessing and Double Shock. Revival Blessing revives, bringing a fainted Pokemon up to half health, while Double Shock acts as burn up but for your electric typing. Double Shock has a nice benefit though of not removing your Terrestrial electric typing, meaning you'll actually be able to use this move multiple times in a row as long as you're Terra electric. This turns Pawmot into an absolute monster in-game against most opponents who don't resist your stabs. Going into our normal type, we have none other than Grafaiai. Grafaiai offers a lot to any given team, whether it's the fast speed stat, the unburden and poison touch abilities, or your strong move pool. Even through level up alone, Grafaiai has access to moves such as Poison Jab, U-Turn, and Knockoff in order to provide you with a strong normal type for your team. While Unburden can allow some really fun sets with moves like Substitute and Swords Dance, ultimately I think Poison Touch provides more to a majority of in-game teams, unless you're really trying to tailor a Grafaiai sweep. With Grafaiai's typing matching up well against opponents such as Ortega and Rhyme, this is probably one of the stronger normal types you'll have access to in these games, unless you count Terrestrial normal Toxtricity. Going into our ice types, we honestly don't have many options, but I think the best one for these games is probably Titan. As for ice types you'll find in Paldea, I honestly don't believe you'll find many better options personally. Most ice types either are pretty terrible in-game, or evolved way too late to be worthwhile using. However, Titan actually has a lot going for it. Titan evolves through the use of the Ice Stone, which are actually pretty easy to find on the ground where you'd encounter Citadel in the first place. You'll also have access to strong moves, such as Ice Shard and Ice Spinner through level up for stab options. If you want to teach Titan a strong option to attack steals, you'll probably have to use a Stomping Tantrum TM, which will also benefit you against matchups for Fire and Rock type Pokemon. Titan will be a strong asset to your late game battles against Hassel, Larry, and Rika. So if you put in the time to find one, you will be able to reap the rewards for your Elite Four matches. We have not only our best fighting type, but also probably one of the best Pokemon you can even use in general in Scarlet and Violet, Annihilate. With your incredible Ghost and Fighting typing, it's actually probably shorter to name the bad matchups you have in these games, with your worst being against Ortega. Despite this one unfortunate matchup, Annihilate is able to do some insane damage against the majority of opponents, between access to moves such as Rage Fist and close combat through level up. Without it being a legendary Pokemon, I doubt that Game Freak could even manage to create a Pokemon that ends up surpassing Annihilate in any future titles, due to this typing, as well as its incredible bulk and offensive stats being so hard to power creep within reason. Moving away from more offensively oriented Pokemon, we have our strongest poison type being Clodsire. Clodsire, being not only a poison but also a ground type, grants it a lot of strong defensive advantages in these games. With your ground typing, you're able to obtain a strong defensive check to opponents such as Iono, while your poison typing provides you a strong defensive check to Ortega and Brasius' teams. Speaking of Ortega, despite their team having an Azumarill, Clodsire typically ends up having the ability Water Absorb, which allows Clodsire to become one of the strongest checks in the game to this Pokemon. Clodsire's strongest benefit would probably come in the form of its access to all three hazards, allowing you the means of damaging your opponent's teams quickly without actually needing to use offensive moves. Clodsire is one of those rare defensive Pokemon that manages to not only have a use in competitive, but also on your in-game journey. For our ground type entry, we have our first older Pokemon being Gastrodon. Gastrodon is pretty similar in terms of viability to Clodsire actually, with both having an immunity to water, both sharing the ground type, and both having strong defensive options for the in-game. I value Gastrodon a bit more in terms of your ground typing however, as it has a bit easier of a time handling battles you'd want a ground type for, such as Mela's team, as well as Poppy's team. Gastrodon's dual water and ground typing has only one weakness being grass, which is actually pretty rare in these games. Despite the loss of Scald from Gastrodon's moveset, you can still take advantage of moves such as Muddy Water and Earth Power in order to defeat a majority of battles in these games. In Scarlet and Violet, Gastrodon proves why it will always be one of, if not the best ground-type Pokemon to use on any in-game team. We have another returning Pokemon for our Flying-type entry, with one of the strongest in-game Pokemon of all time being Gyarados. Gyarados is probably one of the lowest drawback Pokemon you can possibly use in any game, with a strong typing of Water and Flying, as well as the ability Intimidate. Gyarados having access to moves such as Dragon Dance, Ice Fang, Crunch, and Waterfall all through level up allow it the ability to be a monster in most battles for these games, such as Mela, Rika, Larry, and even the Iron Treads or Great Tusk Titan battles. Despite Gyarados typically being a strong presence, I actually would argue these are the worst games to use Gyarados in. This mostly comes from the fact there are bosses for every type, and even types Gyarados would typically be strong against have options around Gyarados, such as Rika's Clodsire. Despite the improvement these games made to their boss battles handling Gyarados, it still manages to hold the spot as one of the most terrifying Pokemon to use in-game. Getting into our best Psychic type, I think you guys already know what Pokemon I'm going at. Best team veteran, as well as Scarlet and Violet's MVP, Gardevoir. Due to you guys getting sick of Gardy, I'm just gonna keep this brief. Its typing of Psychic and Fairy makes it a monster for a lot of the battles in these games, not to mention its killer move pull and pretty good stats all around. Gardevoir is pretty much MVP, and if you've seen my previous videos about it, then it should be no surprise that it made the best Psychic typing. With a solid special attack stat of 125, added with a decent speed of base 80, Gardy cuts through these games like butter. I'm done talking about Gardy though, because you guys are sick of this thing. I also wanted to add in a small bit about Armarouge. Armarouge is also very good, and it came in at a very close second place. It's got really solid special attack, decent speed, and a pretty overall all good move pool. So I would definitely call Armarouge as a runner-up Pokemon. Moving on to our bug type, we have another returning Pokemon on our list, being Heracross. These games, our bug type options, left us with options that were either horrendous for the in-game, or options that were absolute monsters in our playthrough. As far as comparable options, I felt Volcarona and Scizor weren't worth the trouble of evolving due to how terrifying Heracross was already, but these are both still strong options to consider. I find Heracross to mostly be useful for the gym leaders, as your typing allows you a strong response to Larry, Tulip, and Grush's gyms especially. However, at worst, Heracross will provide you with a strong neutral option to most battles besides Rhyme and Ortega, regardless of what ability your Heracross ends up using. Getting into our best rock type, I feel like we finally got a strong rock type in-game that is only rivaled by Lycanroc and Tyranitar, being Garganacl. Garganacl has the benefit of an incredible defensive stat line while also having its signature ability Purifying Salt, which grants you an immunity to status conditions as well as a resistance to ghost types. Garganacl helps take advantage of this through moves such as Recover, as well as its signature move Salt Cure, that does 1/8 every turn to any Pokemon besides Water and Steel types, which take 1/4 damage every turn. This is an incredible option for Garganacl to deal extra damage to Pokemon that would otherwise pressure rock types, without the need for more than a single offensive option. When comparing Garganacl to Lycanroc and Tyranitar, I appreciate the defensive utility Garganacl provides over Lycanroc's more offensive nature. Meanwhile, I also appreciate how it only takes you until level 38 to obtain Garganacl instead of level 55 if you want a Tyranitar. Garganacl will probably establish itself as a pretty strong rock type that future generations of rock type Pokemon will be compared to for the best rock type you can use. We've already discussed the Scarlet evolution of Charcadet, but for our ghost type entry, we have our Violet exclusive, being Ceruledge. Ceruledge in some cases I find is slightly better than Armarouge in these games, which solely comes down to your signature move being Bitterblade. But due to Armarouge's humongous move pool, I still think that it outdoes it by a little bit. For one, you actually obtain your signature move at a reasonable level, being 48, whereas Armarouge obtains its signature move at level 62. Ceruledge's signature move essentially is a fire-type Leech Life, allowing Ceruledge a free recovery option while destroying opponents of Swords Dance boosted Bitterblades. I find Ceruledge is fairly interchangeable in most of Armarouge's strong matchups too, as you still are strong against Poppy and Giacomo, while Ceruledge has probably one of the strongest matchups in the game against Tulip's team. Ceruledge is probably one of the best ghosts you can use in these games, and I genuinely can't think of a comparable option to this other than Skeledirge and Annihilate, both of which are already listed for other types today. With our strongest Dark-type Pokemon, we have one of the most destructive new Pokemon in the game, being Mabostiff. Mabostiff is a fairly bulky Dark-type new to the Paldea region. Mabostiff has a few benefits over its Dark-type counterparts, such as an early evolution level and the ability Intimidate. You evolve into Mabostiff at level 30, meanwhile, your best rival for an in-game Dark-type Crocodile evolves into its middle stage at level 29. While there are naturally stronger Pokemon, such as Kingambit or Hydreigon, their evolutions being so late in your journey allows Mabostiff to shine as the strongest Dark type. Mabostiff learns a lot of strong options, such as Jawlock and Crunch, while having access to TMs such as the Elemental Fangs and Play Rough. Mabostiff has the ability to pressure opponents such as Rhyme and Tulip's gyms, while still being hard for most opponents besides Ortega and Airy to actually defeat, without losing half of their Pokemon due to your typing in bulk. Up next, we move on to one of the best typings in the game, being Dragon, where we have none other than Cyclizar. Cyclizar has proven to be a terrifying option for the Dragon typing due to its fast speed tier and its decent mixed offensive stats. Because Cyclizar is a normal type, it has access to an extremely wide TM move pool, with options such as Overheat and Fire Fang for Steels, or Iron Head for Fairy types. We also have U-Turn for Momentum, and even Shift Gear to allow Cyclizar to set up and sweep opponents. Cyclizar is able to destroy opponents such as Mela, Iono, and Hassel's teams thanks to its strong resistance to Electric and Fire, while attacking Hassel's team for super effective damage with its Dragon Stab. Cyclizar also, unlike its fellow Dragon counterparts, doesn't have to worry about evolving late in your journey, as you can encounter Cyclizar as low as level 20, without the need to ever evolve this Pokemon. With our best Steel type for Scarlet and Violet, we have the new Pokemon, Tinkaton. Despite Tinkaton's low stats, all you need is its signature move, Gigaton Hammer, which is a 160 base power Steel type move. The only caveat when using this move is you can't use it twice in a row. However, typically this single use is enough for Tinkaton to one-shot opponents. Tinkaton's able to destroy teams such as Atticus, Ortega, Tulip, Grusha, and the Titan Bombardier. Regardless of what ability you obtain on Tinkaton, you'll find significant use for it on your journey with this single move. If you find that Tinkaton's needed for battles that aren't destroyed by Still though, I recommend teaching Tinkaton Swords Dance, as you'll be able to boost attacks such as Knock Off, Play Rough, and Brick Break in order to defeat any opponent that would otherwise give you trouble. For our final Pokemon on today's list, we end up going over another returning Pokemon to these games, being Azumarill. Azumarill is probably one of the strongest Pokemon in these games offensively, with very few opponents having a strong response to your stab combination. Azumarill having a dual fairy and water typing, as well as at least a neutral matchup against every Titan, if not a super effective matchup. Azumarill only needs Play Rough and Aqua Tail to defeat a majority of bosses in these games, both of which you learn through level up, very early at that too. Azumarill is probably one of the strongest Pokemon you can use of any type in these games, with the only thing holding it back being the fact you only learn Aqua Jet as an egg move. Despite the lack of a strong priority option, it ultimately doesn't matter too much when your opponents will lose most of their Pokemon to your Azumarill. That was our list of the best Pokemon of every type in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. While there are plenty of strong Pokemon you can use on your journey, these were the ones I felt were the best to use for your journey. Make sure to comment your lists down below in the comments, as I love to see what you guys think are the best Pokemon to use for each type. If you made it this far, make sure to leave a like on the video and use that subscribe button to stay up to date for more future Scarlet and Violet content. Thanks for watching the video and for coming through and enjoying Scarlet and Violet with me. We've got so much content coming surrounding Gen 9 through the end of the year and beyond, including the top 10 strongest Pokemon, the best team for the games, and much more. If you're interested in more Mystic content, check out my TikTok and Mystic Umbreon Shorts YouTube channel. When we get to 5,000 subs on the channel, we're going to have a new series related to Scarlet and Violet that will be exclusive to there, so go subscribe. Also, if you're into fanfictions or Genshin Impact, check out Mystic Reads and Tevotchnary. I offer a ton of creative spoken word content over there, and I do a bunch of theories and lore videos surrounding Genshin Impact. So come join me over there at that floats your boat. That's all for now. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time for more Scarlet and Violet content.